Stargate Voyager.
Hey guys, welcome to the Stargate Voyager podcast. I'm Derek Olson. Thanks for watching. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the apology heard around the world regarding Graham Hancock and Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass. And then we're going to go to Gobekli Tepe to look at what appears to be a literal cover-up of ancient history. You are not going to want to miss this episode. So let's just dive right in. So Graham Hancock has apologized to renowned Egyptologist and archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass. So Graham Hancock just the other day released a photo of he and Hawass smiling together at a restaurant in Cairo with the following statement on his social media channels the other day. He says, quote, "Last week in Cairo, renowned Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass graciously accepted my apology for my unkind words to him at a public event in 2015. We still disagree about many things, but in future our disagreements will be friendly, respectful, and constructive. I don't want to come to the end of my days still carrying too much baggage from old conflicts, and I'm extremely happy to be back on good terms with Zahi. It's going to stay that way. The attached after-dinner photo says it all," end quote. And if you're watching this on Spotify or YouTube or wherever this podcast can be seen, you're going to see the photo that Graham posted with him and Zahi Hawass real close to each other, smiling. Looks like they just enjoyed a great meal together, and it looks like they're almost friends, if that's possible. So if you're kind of new to the Graham Hancock and Dr. Zahi Hawass subject, Graham here is referring to what's become known by some as the debate debacle of 2015. And this was supposed to happen in April of 2015, where Graham Hancock and Zahi Hawass were supposed to debate together in what was billed and advertised as the first open debate between the representatives of two completely different versions of history. On one hand, you'd have Graham Hancock representing us alternative researchers, and on the other side, you'd have Dr. Zahi Hawass, who represented the mainstream view, the academic view, the archaeologist and Egyptological view of the mainstream flavor. And Dr. Zahi Hawass is an icon of the mainstream point of view, and some have said he's one of the most famous archaeologists in the world. And so, again, back in 2015, he had agreed to participate in this public debate with Graham Hancock. Again, I would say Graham is the foremost leader of the alternative history camp of researchers. Now, each was supposed to give a 1-hour presentation, followed by a debate in which the audience would join in with questions. However, at some point before the debate, Zahi had refused to even accept a coin toss to decide the speaking order of the debate and insisted that Graham speak first only. Now, Graham graciously accepted this and agreed to this, despite the fact, obviously, that the first speaker of any debate is at a big disadvantage since he does not have the opportunity to hear the other speaker's presentation before giving his own. So the big day of the debate finally arrives. I believe it was April 22nd of 2015, if my memory serves me right. People are starting to slowly trickle in to the event center. Graham and Zahi are in there getting their presentations and PowerPoints ready. Graham is looking at his slideshow, making sure everything's in order. And while he's flipping through his slides, again, before the debate starts, Zahi is like in a corner of the room and he looks up and he sees on the screen a picture of researcher and author who has since passed away, Robert Bauval. And Robert Bauval is pictured in one of Graham Hancock's slides. So as soon as Zahi sees this image of Robert Bauval, he becomes furiously angry. And he basically shouts at Graham, according to the accounts, and made some supposed insulting and demeaning comments about Robert Bauval, and told Graham that if he dared to even mention even a single word about Robert in his talk, that he would walk out and refuse to debate. So you can imagine how heated things were getting. This is just a few minutes before the debate is about to start. And Graham is apparently trying to explain to Zahi Hawass that the alternative view of history that he was on stage to represent could not exclude the Orion correlation that Graham was going to unpack that night, and therefore could not exclude Robert Bauval, because Robert Bauval had discovered the Orion correlation as it relates to the Orion pyramids correlation, which links to the Sphinx Leo correlation at Giza in the epoch of about 10,500 BC. And at that, Zahi marched out of the debating room. Frantic negotiations then took place off stage between the conference organizers and Zahi. Again, people had, paid money and probably flown in from all over the world to see this, right? So finally, Zahi agrees to return and give his talk and answer questions from the audience, but he refused to hear or even see any of Graham's presentation, or even to engage in any kind of debate with Graham Hancock. So Graham ended up giving his talk without Zahi present. According to reports, Zahi sat in a room outside the conference hall while Graham spoke. And when Graham finished, he answered questions from the audience, and then Zahi entered, gave his talk, answered some questions from the audience, and left. Now, at one point during Zahi's Q&A, he was asked a question about the 11,600-year-old megalithic site of Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, and whether it had any impact on his assessment of the disputed age of the megalithic Great Sphinx of Giza. Now, mainstream academia, like Zahi Hawass, believes the Sphinx is from about 2600 BC. But Graham Hancock and many other of his colleagues believe and have long argued that the Sphinx is way older. Dr. Robert Schoch is another one who would argue that it's far older. It's likely 10,500 BC or older. Now, at the time of this debate in 2015, some say that when Zahi was asked this question, he appeared unfamiliar with the great implications of Gobekli Tepe, which is arguably one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. And so basically, he didn't really have much of an answer to the question, which he passed on to the moderator, who was a Dr. Barta, head of the Czech Archaeological Institute in Cairo, whose knowledge of Gobekli Tepe also appeared incomplete, as Dr. Barta used kind of circular logic to argue that Egyptian civilization is thousands of years younger than Gobekli Tepe, and that therefore there could be no connection. Whereas this is exactly the matter in debate and the point of the question asked, namely whether the findings at Gobekli Tepe require open-minded consideration of the possibility that the Great Sphinx and other megalithic structures at Giza, and with them the origins of Egyptian civilization, might in fact be much older than Egyptologists presently maintain. Now, there is a video on YouTube you can find where one of the members who was in the audience before this debate started happened to capture on video part of the exchange between Graham Hancock and Zahi Hawass storming out of the conference room. And you can see how heated it gets. Now, when we go back to the apology that Graham just released the other day, the unkind words that I think Graham was apologizing for was basically when he told Zahi Hawass, he said, "Shame on you," to which Zahi basically just exploded. But again, putting everything in context, the things Hawass had said about Robert Bauval and the way he treated Graham in this situation, to me, was as bad or worse than anything Graham appeared to say or do. So in the end here, it appears to me that Graham was taking the high road in apologizing. And I truly hope this helps to bridge the gap between the chasm that seems to be ever growing between the mainstream worldview of archaeology and history and the alternative history point of view, which to me seems to be ever growing and expanding. But I'd love to know what you think about this. If you're able to, leave me a comment and let me know if you think Graham took the high road, or do you think he should have done more in apologizing? Is there a cover up underway at Gobekli Tepe? This is the question Jimmy Corsetti is asking. He just released a awesome new video on his YouTube channel. I'm going to link it below in the show notes. Definitely check it out and watch the entire thing because he gives a great overview, bullet points of why Gobekli Tepe is one of the most important ancient archaeological sites on Earth. And then he shares several startling facts that he has uncovered. And I'll just give you some bullet points here. So as Jimmy shares, Gobekli Tepe was rediscovered in modern times in 1995. And he shares how this place is like a time capsule. It almost appears to have been buried intentionally. Now, Gobekli Tepe is not only one of the most mysterious ancient sites on Earth, but as Jimmy breaks down, it is one of the world's oldest sites at 11,600 years old and one of the largest at over 22 acres in size. That's 50 times larger than Stonehenge. Now, the discovery of Gobekli Tepe totally upended the version of history most of us were told growing up, that civilization basically emerged from Mesopotamia around 6,000 years ago. It messes that up because it's way older than 6,000 years ago. And the crazy thing is, mainstream archaeology is being forced to admit that. So they're having to rewrite their timelines. Now, Jimmy breaks down how the site is comprised of approximately 200 massive T-shaped pillars, but the majority of these pillars are still buried underground, but they've all been identified using ground penetrating radar. These are up to 20 feet tall and they weigh approximately 10 tons. And on the few that have been excavated, when you look up close, they feature these incredible 3D zoomorphic animal like carvings. So these are not primitive. At this site, there was some form of advanced knowledge and possibly even ancient technology used. And Jimmy points out you also have to consider, how did the ancients transport these massive pillars before the invention of the wheel? Now, he points out that only 72 of the 200 plus pillars seen by a ground penetrating radar have been excavated in the span of 29 years since excavations first began, again in 1995. So 29 years, and they've only uncovered 72 of over 200 pillars. Now, this site's also comprised of these 20 known circular enclosures, but of the 20 enclosures, only about 6 have been excavated. And of the 6, they're really only partially excavated. So again, 29 years. This site was discovered in 1995, and we've only got 6 of them that are kind of halfway excavated out of 20. He goes down the rabbit trail and begins to show multiple sources going back to the year 2017 that had documented that only 5% of Gobekli Tepe had been excavated. Again, this was in 2017. He then cross-checked that with multiple sources who state that still only 5% of Gobekli Tepe has been excavated in the year 2023 or close to today. And so he asked the question, how is it possible that no measurable advances to this dig have been made when excavations began 29 years ago? What is the holdup? So what's more? Well, Jimmy found statements from the powers that be that were even documented in some articles that Gobekli Tepe is being left for future generations to excavate. Then he detailed and uncovered that an organization known as the Dogos Group, I believe it's pronounced, which is one of the largest private sector conglomerates in Turkey, landed a 20-year partnership with the site of Gobekli Tepe that enables them to oversee excavations, and they are the sole partner of the site. Now, this organization has donated over $15 million to excavations at Gobekli Tepe. So Jimmy points out that funding is clearly not an issue in slowing excavations. So what is? Well, he points out that this Dogas group is connected to the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Guess what? The CEO of this group is a member of the World Economic Forum. He's one of their darling billionaires. And even at one of the annual World Economic Forums, I believe it was in 2016, this CEO of the Dogas group gave a big speech at the World Economic Forum talking about Gobekli Tepe and their vision for this site. So Jimmy asks, why is the WEF connected to archaeology at Gobekli Tepe? But what's more, so Jimmy then points out, and I love how he shows all these different aerial shots and drone shots of Gobekli Tepe years ago and in the present. Now, in his video, Jimmy shows several aerial drone shots of Gobekli Tepe in the past and in the present. And he points out how the very foundations and the permanent viewing platforms that they've constructed over the site not only obstruct the view of different points of the site, but even worse, they impede the site from being fully excavated, as these platforms and foundations are sitting right over the site that have not even benefited from being excavated or dug into yet. He then points out how there are two large orchards literally planted right on the top of the site. In between the two main covered enclosures are these two large orchards. Now, he shows photos from years ago, I think it's 2004, aerial shots of the site. There's no orchards. Why are there orchards there today in this site that's sprawling 22 acres? And these are right near the closest, most important spots that are covered that we know of. Clearly, in my humble opinion, there's stuff right under them, but they've planted orchards. Why would you plant orchards on one of the world's most important archaeological sites? And why would they build over 900 meters of concrete roads and walkways sprawling all over this site, installed all over the earth, again, over areas that haven't even been excavated, haven't even had a shovel dug into them yet? You can clearly see it. Now, Jimmy concludes by stating that all of this means that they likely have no intention of fully excavating this site. The scope is incredibly limited, which is why the 5% figure is the same today as it was back in 2017. He points out that any meaningful large-scale dig of the remaining 14 circular enclosures that hold up the majority of the 128 remaining pillars that remain hidden underground are currently at a standstill. And Jimmy finally closes by stating that to not fully excavate this site, with how mysterious and important and large and ancient it is a borderline crime against humanity. And he says it's time to free Gobekli Tepe. Again, click the link in the show notes to see Jimmy's entire video on this. It's over 20 minutes long. And he also is going to do a live Q&A about this important subject. And so click the link in the show notes to watch that and share it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, do me a favor and share it with somebody. Share it on social media. Leave me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you can leave a rating or a great comment. And until next time, keep exploring.